Forget the crying. The real secret of Johnny Carson was the dangerous private life he desperately concealed from the public. We uncover the shocking tirade accidentally caught on tape from Las Vegas, where Carson threatened a mob-connected figure and nearly ended his career. The president's call and the real insult. The late 1970s were a tumultuous time for American politics, and Johnny Carson, though publicly neutral, held court in the most powerful seat in the media. Presidents understood that a mention or a joke could shift public perception dramatically, granting a leader or a policy an almost instant seal of approval or contempt, a power Carson wielded with deliberate restraint in public. In 1978, during a fraught period of foreign policy marked by high tension overseas and difficult negotiations at home, the White House was insistent on a call patched through directly to the Burbank studio, a move that was highly unusual and underscored the perceived urgency of the moment. The request came during the segment before the final commercial break, a time when the show was guaranteed maximum national viewership. Fred de Cordova, the executive producer, looking pale and stressed by the high-level intrusion, relayed the message to Carson via a hurried note slipped onto the desk. Carson took the handset, the iconic red light of the telephone blinking furiously as the president was connected live to the studio. The audience saw the smooth, polite transition, observing the master television host at his most statesman-like, masking any displeasure perfectly. "Yes, Mr. President, thank you for calling in tonight." The conversation was brief, genial, and entirely forgettable, covering superficial pleasantries and a quick, public reassurance to the American people regarding a minor international dispute. Carson was the perfect statesman, quickly putting the phone back in its cradle with a polite nod. The audience applauded, assuming the segment was over and a commercial was next. On air, Carson smiled and nodded, turning his attention to the commercial break cue card. But backstage, the atmosphere had gone from polite distraction to frozen panic. Carson, believing his lapel microphone was completely powered down and speaking softly to a writer standing just off camera, leaned in, his eyes, seconds ago, twinkling with televised congeniality, were now sharp with contempt and fatigue, reflecting the enormous toll the job took on his patience and his low opinion of political figures. The line was picked up clearly by the open microphone, the dedicated audio line, and streamed directly into the headphones of every crew member in the booth, in the stage wings, and on the audio truck. The technical glitch was a simple, missed cue in the complex routing matrix of the audio console. The writer, a nervous young man, asked, "How was he, Johnny?" Carson's voice, low, weary, and dripping with unfiltered cynicism, cut through the control room's casual chatter. "I've been talking to empty suits all night, but this one's talking to himself. He actually believes half the nonsense he's selling, and he's reading his lines off his cuff." It was a casual, cynical dismissal, not just of the president's politics, but of his very intellect. The comment was instantly shut down by the desperate audio engineer, who violently yanked the fader down, but the damage was done. 30 people, from the lighting director to the show's accountant, had just heard Carson deliver a brutal, unfiltered takedown of the commander-in-chief. The irony was devastating. Carson had just reassured millions of Americans that the nation was in good hands, only to confirm privately that he thought the man in charge was a delusional, lightweight, utterly detached from the realities of the world. The episode was a chilling confirmation that the late-night host's public persona was merely a perfectly tailored mask, concealing a deep and ruthless well of private judgment. This contempt for the powerful would soon be replaced by a private fury that exposed Carson to real-world, dangerous retaliation. The Vegas rant that almost ended The Tonight Show. While Carson's political assessment was merely embarrassing, his temper, when unleashed, could have ended his career or worse. The political arena was one thing, but the true heat in Carson's private life often centered on his main escape, Las Vegas, a city where the veneer of glamour hid a core of dark, powerful interests that commanded real-world danger. In the early 1970s, Carson was performing rare remote broadcasts from Caesar's Palace, treating the audience to the glamorous excess of the Vegas Strip and securing a massive paycheck, far exceeding his NBC salary. This was a highly stressful period for Carson, coinciding with the bitter breakup of his second marriage to Joanne Copeland and the intense pressure of maintaining his status as the undisputed king of television against rising competition. These broadcasts required complex technical setups, including dedicated audio lines that connected the casino stage back to the NBC control room in Burbank, California, over a network of leased landlines and satellite feeds, a system prone to subtle failures. The show on this particular evening was tense. The audience was loud, the jokes were landing inconsistently, and Carson, visibly exhausted, was running on fumes, his exhaustion fueled by weeks of negotiating personal and professional pressures. He made it through the final segment, signed off for the West Coast, and watched the red light on the main camera turn dark. He breathed a sigh of relief, turning his back on the audience as the stagehands began clearing the props and disconnecting equipment. However, one of the remote audio lines, the dedicated high-frequency feed running from his lavalier microphone, remained open to Burbank, the subtle but fatal technical flaw in the new remote setup. This feed was intended for post-production mixing but was currently routed live. Carson, believing he was speaking only to his personal bodyguard and one close confidant, launched into a tirade. This wasn't professional frustration. This was personal fury, aimed at a powerful, established figure in Las Vegas. For weeks, a local figure, whom we'll call Mr. Sands, a man with known connections to the organized crime elements that controlled many facets of the city, had been pressing Carson about a high-risk, high-reward investment in a new hotel project. Carson had refused, knowing the shady nature of the deal. The pressure had escalated from polite requests to thinly veiled threats against his personal security and reputation. Now, in the presumed privacy of the dark stage, Carson unloaded. His voice, usually a smooth, controlled baritone, was clipped and laced with pure rage. The full exchange was a blistering, one-sided condemnation, laced with specific, unbroadcast threats and insults against Mr. Sands. The Burbank control room immediately went silent. The engineers were not just hearing their host vent, they were hearing him engage in a verbal confrontation that bordered on career suicide. The show's audio director frantically cut the line, but the essential message had already been captured on the unmonitored backup recording channel. The hot mic quote itself was chilling, referencing the figure's reputation for violence. "Sands thinks he can shake me down? Tell him if he wants my attention. He can come back here and wait like the rest of the garbage. He's going to find out I own more lawyers than he owns thugs." The fallout was immediate and intense. The next morning was filled with high-stakes phone calls between NBC executives, their corporate lawyers, and anonymous intermediaries trying to prevent the full context of the threat from reaching Sands. The threat was clear. Carson's reckless private opinion had exposed the network to massive liability and potential danger. It took days of intricate negotiation to ensure that Mr. Sands, hearing rumors of the outburst, understood the comment was simply the ravings of a tired comedian, not a declaration of war. Carson had always been powerful, but this hot mic moment proved he was not invincible and that his private opinions had real-world, possibly lethal, consequences. The only thing more volatile than his outside threats was the internal pressure he exerted on the people closest to him. The moment Ed McMahon's loyalty was tested. The partnership between Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon was the bedrock of late-night television. Their bond was presented as genuine, rooted in 25 years of shared success, laughter, and camaraderie. Everyone knew the dynamic. Johnny was the king, and Ed was the loyal jester, the man who laughed on cue. But what happened off-camera, when the cameras were still running, spoke volumes about the true professional distance between them. The incident occurred around 1980, during a particularly busy sweeps week. The Tonight Show often featured animal acts, unpredictable, occasionally disastrous segments that caused Carson visible discomfort and frustration due to their lack of control and disruption of his precise timing. On this particular evening, a trained chimpanzee segment went spectacularly wrong, resulting in minor chaos and a handful of jokes that fell completely flat. The energy in the studio plummeted. During the next commercial break, Carson threw his pencil onto the desk with a sharp clatter of pure irritation. Ed McMahon was sitting near his own desk, attempting to engage the audience with a hearty laugh and a wave, completely unaware of the furious energy radiating from his host. Carson waved a writer over, gesturing toward the desk setup. The lapel microphone, the dedicated audio line, was once again the culprit, having been inadvertently left hot by a distracted sound technician. "Look at this," Carson hissed to the writer, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, only audible to the crew. "The rhythm's completely shot. I'm throwing him cues and he's missing everyone. he followed up with a frustrated shake of the head. The writer mumbled a nervous apology, suggesting that the animal segment had been too distracting. Carson didn't accept the excuse, turning his ire directly toward his longtime sidekick, Ed McMahon, known for his relentless side gigs and endorsements, everything from beer to publishing and, yes, dog food was an easy, though unfair, target for Carson's professional envy and scorn. Carson's voice, clipped and ruthless, delivered a line that revealed the sharp, professional edge he kept between himself and his closest colleague. He's too busy counting those dog food residuals to pay attention. Get a real job, Ed. The phrase hung in the air, a devastating dismissal of McMahon's entire career outside of The Tonight Show. It was a clear, unscripted confirmation that for all their televised warmth, Carson still viewed McMahon as hired help, and a distracted one at that. The network immediately began damage control, and while McMahon himself never confirmed hearing the remark, backstage staff noted a palpable shift in the air between them for weeks afterward. The moment laid bare the truth. In the highly structured, high-stakes world of The Tonight Show, there was only one king, and even his most loyal lieutenant was subject to his brutal, unscripted scorn. If insider stories that expose the sharp, hidden truths about television's biggest legends fascinate you, hit that subscribe button now. We dive deep into the real human moments behind the most iconic figures in television history every week, revealing the unscripted truths that network insiders tried desperately to silence. The network executive firing, I'll buy NBC. If Carson had contempt for politicians and professional distance for his partners, he reserved his purest, unadulterated hatred for the bean counters who ran the network. The relationship between Johnny Carson and NBC was a highly remunerated truce, not a happy marriage. The year 1976 was a particularly brutal contract negotiation year, fueled by Carson's desire for an unprecedented 4-day work week and a massive salary increase. The network was struggling with scheduling decisions and budget cuts, and they dared to believe they had leverage over Carson. They were devastatingly wrong. The executive responsible for managing Carson's contract and late-night scheduling was named Michael Rourke. Rourke was in the control booth that night, watching the taping. He was a corporate man, obsessed with cost-cutting and the bottom line, and he was unfortunately present in the control booth that night, watching the taping through the soundproof window. Carson, aware of Rourke's presence, played the final minutes of the show with icy professionalism. As the program drew to its close, Carson went through the customary sign-off procedure. He delivered the final pleasantries, waved goodnight, and the closing credits began to roll. He was instructed to keep his lapel microphone live for the first 30 seconds of the credits, a failsafe in case of any last-minute breaking news. Carson did not look at Rourke, but he knew exactly where the executive was sitting. He looked straight into the lens of the still-active main camera, ensuring he was staring directly at the executive's monitor in the control booth. He lowered his voice to a whisper that was perfectly captured by the open audio channel. Rourke had recently made the mistake of filling the prized lead-out slots, the shows immediately following The Tonight Show, with cheaply produced, recycled programming, hurting the overall NBC late-night brand. This was, in Carson's view, not just an insult to his audience but a threat to his dominance. Carson's whisper was a chilling mix of ego, power, and genuine fury. Tell Rourke if he keeps putting reruns in my lead-out, I won't just walk, I'll buy this entire damn peacock and make him mop the floor. The phrase, buy this entire damn peacock, a direct reference to the NBC logo, reverberated through the control room. It was not a joke. It was a raw, unfiltered threat of nuclear retaliation, a reminder that Carson was not just an employee. He was a self-sustaining empire, with the financial means and the public backing to potentially execute the threat. The network's lawyers immediately scrambled to address the comment, but the underlying power dynamic had been irrevocably established. Carson's unscripted moment confirmed what everyone suspected. He didn't just host the network, he owned it, psychologically and financially. That specific executive, Michael Rourke, was transferred to a less sensitive division within 6 weeks. The king had spoken, and the network had complied. But the network wasn't the only recipient of Carson's private cruelty. The starlet who never returned, a private indecency. Hollywood's ecosystem thrives on gossip, but Johnny Carson was often the source of the most devastating, Career-ending private opinions. The hot mic moments often revealed not just his temper, but his ruthless, private criteria for judging talent and beauty. The incident involved a rising young actress, a beautiful woman we'll call Veronica Lane, who appeared on the show in the early 1980s. She was the quintessential Hollywood starlet, stunning, charismatic in stills, but tragically nervous and unprepared for the demands of live, quick-witted conversation. The interview was a disaster. Lane's answers were hesitant, she giggled nervously at inappropriate times, and she clearly couldn't keep up with Carson's legendary rapid-fire pacing. The segment concluded awkwardly. As the stage lights brightened for the commercial break, Lane rushed off stage, visibly upset and shaking. Carson watched her go. He turned to his lead writer, a man who had helped craft the gentle, supportive questions designed to carry her through the segment. A camera operator, still rolling to capture any technical issues, kept Carson's microphone live for emergency audio. Carson, unaware the channel was open, delivered a verdict that confirmed a long-standing Hollywood rumor about his private opinion of certain guests, that he had little patience for beauty without genuine talent. He leaned into his writer, his voice a low, cold assessment, stripping the young woman of all her glamour in a few swift words. He focused not on her poor performance, but on the perceived artificiality of her career. She's all looks and no script. She should be selling toothpaste, not pretending to act. I have no time for tourists. The crew exchanged wide-eyed glances. The contempt in the host's voice was unmistakable. The term tourists was his personal label for anyone he felt didn't belong in the high-stakes world of true entertainers. Veronica Lane never appeared on The Tonight Show again, despite her career continuing for several years. Her name became shorthand among the show's writers for a certain type of guest that Johnny would never tolerate. The hot mic moment confirmed that for Carson, the polished television exterior was merely a sorting mechanism. Those who failed to meet his exacting, unscripted standard were simply removed from the rotation, often without knowing the precise, withering comment that sealed their fate. Doc Severinson's backstage pay cut revelation. The Tonight Show band, under the direction of the flamboyant Doc Severinson, was more than background noise. They were an essential part of the show's chemistry. Doc was Carson's musical straight man, a visual and sonic counterpoint to the host's legendary coolness. But beneath the brass and the big smiles, there was the same cold, hard reality of business that defined Carson's relationship with NBC. The year was 1975. During a charity-focused episode designed to raise money for a children's hospital, the atmosphere was supposed to be warm and communal. Doc Severinson, in a shimmering gold suit, played a final, enthusiastic flourish before the camera turned to the stage curtain for the next segment. Carson, standing center stage, believed the production team had turned off his lapel mic and was now speaking only to the network lawyer who had joined him just off camera. The lawyer was discussing a new, highly complex contract offer that NBC had just submitted to Carson, which included an entire restructuring of the show's budget and staff salaries. In the midst of the discussion, the lawyer mentioned the budget for the orchestra. Carson, focused only on his own leverage, made a snap, unfeeling comment about the bandleader's compensation. The microphone was, once again, live to the house speakers backstage and the control room. Doc Severinson was standing just 30 feet away, wiping down his trumpet, surrounded by his band members. They were celebrating the success of the charity moment. They froze when they heard Carson's voice, devoid of its signature warmth, discussing their financial future. Carson's voice, sharp and dismissive, delivered the devastating detail. He's getting 7% less than last year, and he'll still blow that damn horn. He hasn't seen the final number. The room went instantly silent. The 7% figure was specific and cruel. Severinson, a key creative element and Carson's friend, was about to be blindsided by a major, previously unmentioned pay cut, and he learned about it through a technical failure that broadcast his boss's callousness. The incident caused a significant, though silent, rift. Severinson never publicly addressed the comment, but the private betrayal was immense. It was yet another devastating hot mic confirmation that no matter the friendship or shared history, Carson remained, first and foremost, a businessman with a ruthless focus on his own bottom line. The money was always the measure of the man, the teleprompter rebellion, and the unbroadcast word. The monologue was Johnny Carson's cathedral. It was the most disciplined, tightly written piece of late-night television in history. Every joke was tested, every pause calculated. The teleprompter was his security blanket, ensuring the flow was immaculate. But what happened when the jokes failed and the host rebelled? In the early 1970s, a string of jokes about a minor political scandal completely misfired. The punchlines landed with a heavy thud, and the audience responded with a mixture of polite laughter and awkward silence. The moment hung in the air, tense and uncomfortable. Carson attempted a quick recovery joke, but the rhythm was already gone. He gestured at the teleprompter operator to skip ahead. The operator, panicked by the failure, was communicating intensely with the director in the control booth. Suddenly, a technical error caused the director's urgent, panicked instruction to be piped momentarily into the house speakers above the audience. "Get him back on the card! Get him back on the card!" The audience heard the instruction, confirming that Carson was reading prepared material, a revelation that always stripped some magic from the moment. Carson's eyes narrowed. He looked away from the teleprompter, a look of pure, unadulterated contempt crossing his face. Believing only the control room could hear him now, Carson leaned slightly off mic, channeling all his frustration, the pressure of live television, and the failure of his writers into a single, brutal response directed at the script's origin and the network's overmanagement. He uttered a single, highly offensive, unbroadcast obscenity, an extremely coarse word that the Federal Communications Commission would have levied a staggering fine for had it reached the air. The word was directed not at the audience, but at the unseen writer and the director who dared tell him what to do. The control room audio engineer slammed the channel shut, but the damage was done. 30 people heard the king of late night drop the mask entirely, revealing a man who, when faced with failure, resorted to the language of the gutter. The incident was a vivid demonstration that Carson's celebrated improvisational grace was often fueled not by creative joy, but by white-hot rage against anything that undermined his infallibility. It was the absolute contrast to the smooth, sophisticated persona and the starkest evidence of the immense pressure he managed every night. Tell us in the comments, what classic late-night host's unscripted meltdown should we investigate next? Leno, Letterman? We want to know which legend's private moments you want exposed. The guest who took the chair, a personal vendetta. For Johnny Carson, the desk and the chair were not merely props. They were the physical embodiment of his power, his territorial marker. This was not a friendly couch. It was a throne, the nerve center of his kingdom. And the few guests who violated his unwritten laws often faced his silent, career-defining wrath, sometimes captured by the hot mic. A self-important, garrulous actor, Rex Martin, appeared on the show in the mid-1970s. Martin was the type of guest who saw The Tonight Show not as a showcase, but as a platform to project his own ego. During a commercial break, Martin violated the cardinal rule of the set. While Carson had stepped away for a quick break and makeup touch-up, Rex Martin physically rose from the guest chair, walked behind Carson's iconic desk, and sat down in the host's chair, gesturing wildly to his own publicist standing in the wings, attempting to capture a moment of monumental, usurping arrogance. A stage manager immediately attempted to intervene, but Martin laughed him off. Carson returned to the stage and stopped in his tracks. His expression was a mixture of stunned fury and cold disbelief. He didn't explode. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked straight off stage again, his back to the cameras. The dedicated audio lines still live. He addressed the producer standing by the curtain, his voice a low, throbbing monotone of controlled violence. The producer, aware of the active microphone, tried to whisper, but Carson's voice cut through the background music clearly. "Get that damn tourist out of my spot. If his rear end touches that leather when the light comes on, I'm walking out this door and getting on a plane." The producer, terrified, replied, "But Johnny, he's just..." Carson's final, unscripted word of instruction was picked up, revealing the precise, almost superstitious rules of his domain. "My chair, my desk, my show. Get him out." The scramble to remove Rex Martin was instantaneous. Stagehands practically shoved the bewildered actor back to the guest chair just as the red light returned. Martin was visibly confused, but Carson returned with a smile fixed in place. The Carson cool persona restored. The rest of the interview was a professional ice age. Rex Martin never sat on The Tonight Show again. The moment underscored the ultimate truth of Carson's tenure. He might appear to share the stage, but the power, the set, and the rules were his, and anyone who dared trespass on his territory was instantly erased. The private life confession, a slip of the tongue. For all his charm and public visibility, Johnny Carson was guarded to a fault about his marriages and his personal life. His reputation as a womanizer and his multiple high-profile divorces were fodder for gossip columns, but he rarely, if ever, addressed the pain or the mechanics of those failures on air. He built an emotional wall between the celebrity and the man who kept a fifth of scotch in his dressing room. Carson was interviewing a famous psychologist who specialized in marital counseling. The segment was already uncomfortable for the host, who clearly preferred talking about magic and animals to relationships. The psychologist posed a hypothetical question about the emotional toll of infidelity and the financial demands that often follow in high-net-worth divorce cases. Carson answered quickly, believing the camera had cut away to the split screen and that his personal microphone was delayed or muted. He provided a response that was too fast, too raw, and too specific for it to be a joke or a generalization. He accidentally used a highly specific, painful detail about his own third marriage's collapse, referencing not just emotional betrayal but a staggering financial demand. His voice, filled with genuine bitterness, was heard perfectly in the control room. The jewelry was never enough. She wanted the house, the plane, and the next 20 years of monologue jokes. The sound engineer immediately cut the feed, but the crew members who heard it were stunned into silence. It was a clear, unscripted confirmation of the deeply guarded, hurting man beneath the facade. He hadn't just accidentally revealed a painful detail. He had revealed the depth of his cynicism about marriage itself, confirming that his private life was a transaction of enormous, debilitating cost. The comment proved that his legendary professional composure was a shield, constantly under stress from the chaos of his private life. The episode served as the ultimate vulnerability. After years of protecting his image, the king of late night was momentarily stripped bare, revealing himself to be just a man nursing a deep, expensive wound. It proved his composure was a performance, not a reality. If these stories revealing the private human cost of fame resonate with you, please like this video and share it with a friend who appreciates classic television history. It helps us find more people who care about the secrets behind the screen. The last word, the true meaning of unflappable. The history of late night is littered with moments of chaos, but for Johnny Carson, every unscripted word, every whispered insult, every momentary burst of rage added up to one simple truth. The most unflappable man in television was, beneath the surface, constantly furious, deeply insecure, and intensely human. The hot mic moments we've uncovered: the political contempt for the president, the dangerous rage toward the Vegas figure, the professional cruelty toward Ed McMahon and Doc Severinsen, the dismissive attitude toward the struggling actress, were not isolated accidents. They were pressure releases. They were the sound of the ultimate television professional, losing control of the only thing he truly valued, his privacy. The technical failures that allowed us to hear these moments did more than simply reveal secrets. They fundamentally altered the understanding of his performance. Carson's legendary cool was not a natural state. It was a highly practiced, intensely maintained skill. The drama of his show was not just in the jokes and the guests, but in the effort he expended every night to keep the internal inferno, the anger, the ego, the resentment, the heartbreak from spilling over the velvet ropes of his controlled environment. He was a man who, when the cameras were running, could make the world forget its problems. But the moment the red light went off, he was confronted with his own: the demanding executives, the expensive divorces, the failed jokes, and the personal exhaustion. What the hot mic moments ultimately revealed was this: Carson did not achieve greatness because he was always charming. He achieved greatness because he was always teetering on the brink of not being charming. His mastery was not in his perfection, but in his perfect control of his own imperfection. He was the king of late night, not because he never made mistakes, but because he successfully managed to hide all the mistakes and all the private fury from 20 million viewers for 3 decades. When you look back at The Tonight Show, remember the laughter, remember the stars, but remember too the ghost in the machine, the accidentally live microphone that recorded the raw, unfiltered truth. The truth is that the greatest, most powerful man on television was constantly fighting a war within himself, And sometimes, for a few devastating seconds, the whole world heard the battle. The king of late night was secretly furious, insecure, and ultimately human. And that humanity, often only glimpsed during a technical error, is what truly defined his legacy. As the curtain descends on another chapter of television history, we are left to ponder the remarkable distance between the man the cameras adored and the secrets the soundboard recorded. If you found yourself fascinated by the hidden pressures and private truths of the Tonight Show era, don't let the next secret fade into memory. Hit that subscribe button to join the Johnny Carson Files archive. Tap the like button if you appreciate these deep dive journeys into late night lore, and let us know in the comments which classic television legend's untold story we should uncover next. Until then, keep watching the stage, but always listen carefully to the whispers off mic. Thank you for watching.